Greetings everyone, welcome to another one of our free Friday community classes right here on the YouTubes. I post these every single Friday. This week, tree worship. If that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what will. I am really excited about this particular topic because it is near and dear to my heart and it plays a very integral role in a lot of my personal practices outside of these classes. So hopefully by sharing a bit about our ancestral tree worship ways and ways that we can engage with this in the here and now, you'll be inspired. So that's what we're going to talk about today. A little bit of history, a little bit of why, and a little bit of contemporary practices. So hopefully that's one for you. I want to begin by reading you a little bit from E.O. James's The Tree of Life, an archaeological study. He wrote this in 1966. And it is so beautiful. So let's begin here, shall we? When the secret of life was sought in nature, the sacred tree was the perfect symbol of its mystery, with its leaves and blossoms and fruit, either shedding its verdure in the autumn, only to bring forth afresh its shoots and buds in the spring, or, if remaining evergreen, to typify life everlasting. So for me, his words really exemplify the mystery, the draw, the power of trees. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we get into it today. So the adoration of tree spirits, trees as resting places or natural temples to specific deities, and of course groves of trees as being sacred spaces is a timeless natural phenomenon that has happened across the world in every culture. We are tree obsessed for good reason. We're going to talk about that later too. There's a reason, a practical, fleshy, human reason why tree worship has always existed and why it persists into the modern. This is a really fundamental practice when doing plant spirit work, is the engagement of trees. And so we'll talk about that, right? First, I want to give a little bit of context. Now, some of this stuff comes from not the worship of trees specifically, but worship around them, or trees as an indicator or holder of sacred space. So in 1 Kings 15 verses 13 and 14, we see that when someone comes into a pagan space and they destroy an idol, or they destroy a temple or an altar, it's not enough. That the grove, the sacred forest, the copse of trees around that space is what actually has to be destroyed in order for the idolatry to stop, in order to convert the space, right? So from a biblical perspective, we have many examples of trees being worshipped, forests and groves being sacred spaces. We have to give a nod of gratitude to the chroniclers of the Christian church and to the Bible itself and other Christian texts, because while not intentional, how much of our lore that otherwise would have been stamped out was preserved by these chroniclers saying what you shouldn't do. So we have an idea of what our deep ancestors were doing, and it stirs our blood, and so we start doing it again. I also think about Saint Cerf of Scotland, right? That such a big part of his mission was going through and destroying sacred trees, of cutting down sacred trees, of getting rid of groves, and then building churches, chapels on top of the old pagan spaces, right? This was a saint that he really had a mission against the trees. He was really not impressed by the pagans of the Scottish terrains worshiping trees. Wasn't really into it. There's also lots of stuff in Judaica, right, around trees. The terebinth tree, or sometimes the oak in places where the oak will grow, is either the location of prophecy, or a place where God appears to one of the prophets, or a place where an altar is erected, or oftentimes there's a tree involved in a place where an idolatrous practice is destroyed or put to rest, right? So it kind of comes full circle. From my studies, Not as much tree destruction, and I wonder how much of that has to do with the fact that trees in that part of the world are not necessarily in abundance, right, all year round. So to destroy a tree is destroying food and shade and resources. So just a theory, but we don't see the destruction as much as we do in other texts. In Vedic India and contemporary Hindu India, countless examples of the current manifestation of Indo-European tree lore. They have held the practice together and continue to embody it now as ever. Like most traditions, trees being worshipped for themselves, the tree spirit itself, or in relationship to a deity, or as the seat or vehicle of a deity, or the area around something sacred happening, like the Bodhi tree under which the Buddha was said to attain enlightenment. That tree now a sacred space, a worshipped, tree. So lots of different examples. When in doubt about some of these animistic Indo-European practices, we are fortunate to be able to look to India as they have preserved and continued these practices in the face of much adversity, colonization and all of that. So I always look there when I'm trying to find some good lore. And of course, the forests of tree lore, forests and forests of tree lore from what we now call the Druidic or the Celtic cultures, right? The oak tree, the sacred nematons, whereby sacred space itself is etymologically linked to a word that means a grove. The name for oak, quercus, being related to the root word for church, querc, church, kirk, querc, church is kind of the etymological progression. And of course, the yew tree cults, massive, still happening, right? A little bit on the underground, but the yew workers are still out there for sure doing their things. Here's actually a picture of a yew tree that is well over 2,000 years. I love the sign on this tree so much. And so something to consider is that if you grew up in this village knowing this tree, your parents grew up in the same village and they knew the tree, and their parents knew the tree, and your grandparents knew the tree, and your great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. 2,000 years. How many generations of families is that? So to the normal person, through the human perspective, these trees appeared as immortal, right? They were alive and conscious and aware, and there were cultic practices built around them, and it seemed like they lived forever. So they were a natural place for worship and a natural being to whom we should offer worship, which just means a reciprocal exchange of adoration, right? That the tree is gifting us so many things, so we gift the tree so many things. That's worship, right? It doesn't have to be any other definition than just that. It's entering into sacred reciprocity. Greco-Roman paganism, we have the dryads, the spirits of the trees, so much lore around the nymphs. All the stories of metamorphosis make me so happy, whereby a human is either blessed by a deity and transformed into a sacred tree, or in some cases, a human is cursed by a deity and is turned into a tree or plant, right? Metamorphosis is huge in Greco-Roman paganism, so we see that there. And then those beings, those previously human or previously divine or heroic, now embodying the plant, that plant is now the abode or the physical manifestation of that spirit, and will receive worship in whatever subtle or grandiose forms that may happen. So what I want to focus on here moving forward is not so much trees related to deities or trees related to sacred spaces, but the tree spirit themselves. Why we might want to engage in worship or sacred reciprocity, ritualized reciprocity with tree spirits. Before we do that, I'm going to pull in a little clip here from an early 90s BBC omnibus volume surrounding the legend of the Green Man.
The heavy plough was introduced at about the time when the Christian missionaries were trying to convert the pagan tribes, and their greatest difficulty was to overcome the deep-seated animism, especially the tree worship and the veneration for springs and rocks. The long-term effect of bringing ancient tree worship to an end was that the tough northern peasants felt that they were licensed to hack and to cut and to delve and to dig and to do what they like with nature.
So why worship trees? A good reason to worship trees is that we've always done it, right? There is an ancestral realization of import here that we've continued to do it. We've always done it. We see it pan-globally, pan-culturally. And when I see that happen, I know that there's gravity behind something. There's a reason why these traditions were handed down generation after generation after generation. So I'm at least going to investigate, right? And see how it feels. Trees have a perspective and a wisdom and a connection to the other worlds, the worlds of the green realm, the worlds of the fae, the worlds of the ancestors, that makes them worthy of our veneration. We want to be in sacred relationship with them because they have a perspective that's different than ours, and we will sometimes benefit from said perspective. Their roots grow deeply into the land and connect to the mighty dead and to the substrate and to the liquefied building blocks of life. They're connected there. So if we need to connect there, these are the spirits through which we can make that connection. They are the saints, the intercessories, right? Similarly, their canopies reach high up into the sky, into the circular patterns of the heavens, into moonlight and sunlight and starlight. And from way up there, they look down and see patterns and potentials that we maybe miss being in the thick of things, right? And we want that perspective sometimes. We want that bird's eye view, yes? So that is a reason. Trees, I think this is probably the most important reason trees deserve our adoration, our love, and our worship, is that we are quite literally dependent on them. They provide us with oxygen, they provide us with clean air, they regulate weather and atmospheric conditions on a microclimate scale, they provide us with fuel and fiber and food and medicine and beauty and inspiration and shade. Literally, our lives hang from the branches of the tree, right? So for me, to be in some sort of reciprocity with trees, it not only makes sense, it's ethical, right? That these beings who give so much to us, they're so radically giving. Why would we not want to give back? Why would we not want to respond to those gifts with acts of sacred reciprocity? And I'll give you some ideas of what that can look like here in a moment. And I have notes today, which is why I keep looking down. Normally I don't do that, but there are so many points that I don't want to miss in this class. Trees, kind of talked about this with that old yew tree. They're observers of the human experience. They've watched your neighborhood change. They've watched your street change. They've watched your house change. They've watched landscaping change, climate change, people change, patterns change. They've been there. Even if for only 50 years or 100 years, not necessarily 2,000 years, they have seen metamorphosis and transformation. And their perspective then is the same kind of perspective that we lean into with our elder wives when we go sit with a grandparent. And the grandparent gives us perspective on our lives by telling us how things used to be and how they are now, right? That magic of transformation, there's wisdom in there. The trees have this relationship, they understand, right? We have to see them and experience in that way. Trees are loud and responsive and engaging, usually. Like, there are definitely some trees that tend to like to keep to themselves and be a little on the quiet side. I think yew would be an example of one of those trees for me. But most of them, when we do petitionary work, when we do magical work with them, they are quick to respond. They are fierce to respond. They have the power and the means, and especially when we're open to it through sorceress works. Why would we not want those relationships, right? Would we not want friends who have those ability? And the last point that I'll make here, out of many I could make, is that they are here, physically present. They're in our world. While they inhabit other layers of reality. They are very much engaged in the other world as well. They're also fully present in our world as bridges, as gateways, as liminal beings. They're real. So for people who struggle with the reality of the gods, who struggle with the reality of the ancestors and consciousness surviving death, the reality of other kin, the fae, the elf, cool. Trees are real. You can go out and hug one right now. They're here, right? So the invitation to engagement could not be louder. If you want to step out of the human-centric experience and get animistic and get cosmic with your practice, but you have a hard time going into those theoretical spaces, trees are there, and they're not human. They're different than humans, so you can engage with otherness that way. That's potentially the last bit of proselytization I'll do in this class, because I do proselytize, right? So how do we engage right now? First and foremost, we have to experience the personhood of trees. If trees aren't people, if they're not conscious, aware, spiritual beings, then there's nothing to relate to outside of a materialistic, utilitarian relationship like you have with a pair of scissors, and that only goes so far. So we have to go out and first choose to experience trees as people, to see them for who they are, to try to see them the way our ancestors saw them. And if you question this, read any of your own ancestral lore. Read sacred texts, even non-pagan, non-animist ones. Read lore, myth, story, fairy tales, and you will find in there people relating to trees and plants as people. It's hidden under poetry and story, but it's there, right? So go look for it. Another thing you can do, I'll drive this one home like I always do, is just go out and consciously share breath. Offer your exhalation as your gift. Receive a response gift through your inhalation. Offer your exhalation. Receive through your inhalation. You enter into an altered state of consciousness where perception of the personhood of plants is easier, where experience of the green realm, which is a spirit world that runs parallel to our own, becomes easier. And you drop into this sort of quiet, mindful, fully engaged, following the breath, right? And it's a ritual of gift exchange. It's a ritual of worship, of reciprocity, of giving and receiving, giving and receiving. You can stop there. It's going to take you where you need to go with some practice. You can sit in the torus of the tree, T-O-R-U-S. When we sit under the canopy of a tree, close up to the trunk, we have the canopy above us, and we have the root system under us, and they are holding us in a sphere of power. They're holding us in a temple. This is why our ancestors prayed and worshipped and did magic and did trance and journey work under trees. You'll find it constantly. Altars, shrines, temples, sacred groves, acts of magic, sacrifices, offerings, under trees, under trees, under trees, over and over again. Why do we gloss over this? I don't know. Step under the canopy of a tree during the day when the light is filtering through the leaves and creating that very special kind of viriditas, that special kind of greenness. You want to bathe in that, right? It's very magical. Step into the canopy of trees and allow yourself to experience the difference of atmosphere. Physical, but also energetic, spiritual, that when you move from outside of the tree into the embrace, into that torus, that sphere of the tree, you will sensitize and perceive a difference, and you will understand why we do our work in these places, right? So we can sit in that place intentionally, mindfully trying to engage. There's an act of worship for you right there. Do your spiritual work here. Do your meditation, your journaling, your reading, your prayer, your mantra, whatever thing you do, go find a tree to do it with, right? Under, alongside. See what happens. See how things change. You will be surprised. It only gets better over time. It's like peeling an onion. You'll go deeper and deeper as you sensitize and refine. But even on that first time, being intentional of what you're doing and where you are in the sacred place you hold, things will be different. Go have an organoleptic experience with trees. Feel them, touch them, explore the different textures, the different colors, the different scents. If the tree is safe for you to taste, the different tastes, the different feelings under the canopy, outside of the canopy, on the soil. All of your senses come online as a form of communication. Exploring the physical manifestation of a plant is one of the ways that plants communicate to us. They show us through pattern and color and form their occult botany, right? They're teaching us about themselves through how they appear to the world. Humans do that too, right? We do this as well. Lay offerings. Remember all the things trees have given us. Give something back. Water that you've charged with your own energy, with blessings, with words of power, and the sun and the moon, both go pour as an offering. Your breath, fragrant smoke, incenses that you've crafted, energy, poetry, story, song, whatever you got, go give, right? Trees are very easy to please. They're not like some of our old gods that are very picky and want top shelf whiskey and trees are very, very simple. They want your time more than anything. Why? Because they are aware enough to know that the most prized possession of the modern human person is time, right? Our willingness to go sit down, shut up, and be, right? They know that we would rather throw money at it. We would rather do all kinds of things than go do that. So you go do that and you'll be respected, right? The gift will be well received. Lay petitions is a way to engage deeply in worship of trees. Asking for things, right? So writing out our petitions on paper and tucking that into the bark, making sure you're working with a paper that is natural and not treated with formaldehyde and will biodegrade or go back and get it the next day. The same goes with tying anything on trees. Use your common sense. If it's going to hurt the tree, strangle the tree, prevent growth, be problematic for animals, be there in 20 years from now, rethink. You are a blip in the life path of this tree, the lifespan of this tree. So you leave the space more beautiful, or at least as beautiful as you found it. I hate when I see these pictures of people tying plastic bags and all kinds of garbage to trees, and it's just like, no, this is part of our ancestral tree worship traditions, but we have to be smart about how we do this. You know, think it all the way through to the end, whatever you put there. What is it? What is it going to look like tomorrow? What is it going to look like for the beings who live in that space 24/7, the insects, the fungi, the animals, the birds? What does it look like in 5 years, 10? Think it all the way through. If you can explain your work, go for it. If not, rethink. Circumambulation, I'm going to drop a clip in now from a previous class, which I will link down in the details below. Circumambulating is a massive form of respect in many Indo-European ancient traditions. To walk clockwise or sunwise around a tree or a sacred object or a temple or a grove is an act of reverence, an act of offering your energy. It is a rite of purification and cleansing and detaching. Watch that whole class if you're interested, but I'm just showing you right here what it looks like. This is a beautiful way to reverence a tree, to show them respect. It's a more physical version of you taking a knee or bowing to a tree spirit, which is also totally something you can do and something that we've always done. But I do like the circumambulation a lot. So go check that out. There's details below. So to wrap it up, why would we not want to be in deeper magical relationships with these beings? Powerful, ancient, arcane beings with all of these blessings that they give freely and all of the mysterious blessings that they give when we open our hearts to them. Why would we not want to worship trees? So go ye forth and worship trees, right? Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions or comments, you know where to drop them below. If you want to get access to all the advanced stuff, courses in spiritual herbalism, advanced classes, our monthly plant spirit journeys, there's a link to my Patreon down there. 18 bucks a month, unlimited access to everything. I hope I see you over there. Until then, many blessings of peace and plenty. Tell your favorite tree I said hi.